Hello everyone, my name is Muir and this is X4 Foundations, and today we have some anti-M ship sort of shipped here for you. We're going to be using Nemesis Vanguards simply because on the low preset they have about as much health and shields as AP. That is the Xenon medium ship, if you are wondering. So we have here are a bunch of ships. They are using generally the weapons that you would find at their shipyards. The exception is the Pulsar. The Pulsar is using the Muon Charger, which you get from the Talati. The Ares, which you get from the Holy Order of the Pontifex, that is not using the blast mortars because hitting fighters with those is really difficult, and the AI just doesn't really use them particularly well when you have them on intercept. Against M ships, they will hit more often, but these are ships that you will have on intercept to be the ones that really take down M ships. Now, the main thing about these is that most of these ships have at least three weapon mounts. Some of them have four, and a handful have like five or six. I believe the Chimera has six. The Pulsar, the Argon Pulsar, it has six as well. Chimera might only have five. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to go through these starting at the very top. But the main thing is we're going to talk about them, describe them, and then show how fast they're able to cut through a Nemesis. So let's go ahead and get into it. First and foremost, we have the Nemesis. The Nemesis, well, our build here is using stuff that you would find at the HOP port, so you don't have to buy it from one location and then send it somewhere else for equipment. We have parented combat drives, combat thrusters, parented shields, and then bolt repeaters. So why bolt repeaters? The pulse lasers are on the anti-fighter, the anti-small ship uh, interceptors, if you will, those that we showed previously. And these do more damage than the pulse lasers, but they struggle a little bit more to hit small ships. The reason for that is the projectiles from a bolt repeater move at 1/4 the speed of a projectile from a pulse laser. So 4 kilometers a second versus 1 kilometer. So that is definitely an issue that tends to show up. The other thing is that these do a little bit more damage. So if you had to choose between doing a little bit more damage but being more effective at hitting fighters, probably better off just going with the faster projectiles to hit them. However, this ship is designed to kill medium ships, and as such, it's using bolt repeaters because they just do that little bit more damage, and M ships are a little bit harder to miss. The Barracuda only has 3 weapon mounts. However, the Barracuda is by far the most maneuverable of the heavy fighters that you will get your hands on. It has a ton of health. It can take hits. It pretty much pitches like it's a Nova, and it has more weapon mounts. So all in all, this thing is thing's really good at what it does. It gets outclassed by its own faction, but it is what it is. So this guy, he has an all-rounder because they don't have combat drives. They have combat thrusters. So all-round engines, because that's just what the Boron have. Combat thrusters, Boron shields, and then we have a mix of phase guns on 1 and 3, and on 2 we have an ion Gatling. Why is that? Well, most ships have more hull than they do shields. So while these will not really do much to shields, this will they will contribute to taking down the enemy shields, and this one will deal a great deal of damage to the enemy shields. So shields will go down somewhat slowly, but it still does enough damage overall if everything hits to kill a Xenon P, which will primarily be your real issue. So being able to strip the shields and also stop them from maneuvering, well, slow them down is important, and then doing the actual damage. So let's go ahead and show the video of them cutting through a nemesis.
Hey, stop firing!
Next up, we have the Chimera. The Chimera is the split heavy fighter. It's basically the one with, doesn't have a ton of shields, but it has a lot of hull points, which is fantastic. These are the guys you primarily want to be hunting down medium ships. So what this guy has is we have combat engines. We only have the MK3s here. The MK4s are incredibly expensive for not a huge amount of bonus. So it's something that you would definitely be putting on your small ships. It's definitely something you would put on your small ships. I don't know if they go on medium ships too. But if they do, then it's just something that would be super end game when you're trying to max out your fleet. Keep in mind, the Barracudas can't use these. They can only use boron things. But anyway, just to point that out. So after that, we have combat thrusters. We have shields. Split shields, as mentioned last time, they have the shortest recharge delay, but they also have really crap recharge rate, and their shields aren't great anyway. So they really are meant for hit and run. After that, we have thermal disintegrators on everything. These guys, they do damage where they'll damage the shields, and then some damage will go into hull. So every time you're shooting enemies with this, you are doing hull damage, even if you're having to like slip past them. So these are great in terms of being able to just deal damage to things. They aren't the other thing is that they're kind of inexpensive as well to get the Mark IIs, which is nice. The thing that's not so great about them is that their damage potential is kind of low, but they still are able to overall do the job pretty easily. You can swap these out with, well, the other thing that's really nice about these is that they have a fairly tight spread, so most of the shots are going to hit. If you compare this to something like a neutron Gatling, you really need to get very close to even an M ship for most of the shots to hit and actually deal the damage. The other thing is that it will take around half or so of the neutron Gatling's heat bars to cut through the shields and then cut through the hull, since Ps have about 20,000 health overall, and it'll take the neutron Gatlings more or less all of their heat to deal that damage. So, and that's with 5 weapon mounts and everything. So it is something where it can work out for you. You can use either or. Even with the Tau Accelerator, you won't do enough damage to just flat out kill a P with one firing up to 1 overheat. It's just not really going to happen, assuming all shots hit. In an actual combat situation, you won't really be able to hit with every shot. So, I mean, the enemy doesn't just stand there and let you kill them. So, your mileage may vary, but I think with the thermal disintegrators, that's probably their better mid-range, able to kind of do everything weapon, because we still have to take into account that we're shooting at fighters, shooting at small ships as well, and these will do that damage to small ships and kill them quite effectively. All right, on to the footage.
Why are you shooting me?
Next up, we've got the Eclipse Vanguard. The Eclipse Vanguard is an Argon ship. It is their heavy fighter. Remember, heavy fighters are very durable, and these are really the guys who are intended to take a lot of hits and just go toe-to-toe with the enemy ships. They're not glass cannons, unlike the other Argon ship we'll see here, which is the Pulsar. Alright, so we have combat engines, combat thrusters, shields, and then bolt repeaters on all of our weapon slots. Remember, same thing, bolt repeaters, they do more damage and they're more likely to hit M ships, which is why we're using bolt repeaters. We could use plasma cannons if we really wanted to, but they won't hit small ships particularly often. But that is the Eclipse of Vanguard. Pretty easy build here. You can get all of this from the Argon Wharf. Alright, on to the testing.
Why are you shooting me?
Alright, next up we have the Terran Gladius. The Gladius. He is actually pretty powerful, and Terran weapons in general tend to be slightly better than Commonwealth weapons. We have 4 pulse lasers here, but let's go ahead and go through the build real quick. We have combat engines, Terran combat engines, combat thrusters, Terran shields, and then proton barrages. We have 4 of those. So proton barrages are essentially the Terran variant of the bullet repeater, which is why we used it here. And the main thing to keep in mind with the barrage is one, it fires 3 shots very quickly after each other. They're like right after each other and they move very fast. And the other thing is that they are very accurate and they do a lot of damage. So what we will see here is the bolt repeaters, they typically have to like overcharge and then kill the enemy as soon as they can fire again. Whereas the Gladius will just kill them in one overcharge. So no problem there. The Gladius is also the most likely to be able to kill enemy fighters because the proton barrage travels about as fast as pulse lasers, as far as I can tell. So these will have a fairly easy time hitting enemy small ships as well as medium ships while doing lots and lots of damage. But all right, let's go to the footage.
Stop fighting.
All right, everyone. So this is the other Argon ship that you can get. This is the Pulsar. Now you'll notice that the Pulsar has far fewer hit points than the Eclipse does. The Eclipse has like 4,000 something hull and 2,000 something shield, so much, much more survivable than the Pulsar. The Pulsar, however, has 6 weapon mounts, so its burst damage potential is insane, and were you to put, say, 6 bolt repeaters on it, it would do a lot of burst damage, but then it would take absolutely forever to burn off all its heat because of how heat works. However, we've gotten around that with which is arguably an exploit in the game, which is we're using muon chargers. Anyway, we'll explain those when we get there. So what our build is we have combat engines, combat thrusters, shields, and muon chargers. So why are muon chargers kind of an exploit? Well, it's almost impossible to overheat these things. So your burst damage potential and your sustained damage both effectively scale with the number of slots you've got. Most ships, most weapons, burst damage goes up with the amount of weapons you have, but because of how heat works and how it's going to take them all longer to cool down in between, it's going to take them all longer to cool down, like multiple times longer. the sustained damage actually tends to even out to just being the same as one of those guns. So the Pulsar, because it has 6 guns, we want to use something like a muon charger on it because it doesn't have that problem. Not being able to overheat something is actually a huge bonus. If you're curious, the reality is this. So basically a ship has a certain amount of heat dissipation, and that heat dissipate has a certain amount of heat dissipation percentage, if you will. Let's just say it's 1. And now every weapon has a heat dissipation rate. However, every weapon that is dissipating heat gets a percentage of that 1 modifier. So if you have 1 gun dissipating heat at, say, we'll say 1,000, that just for simplicity, then that one ship is dissipating 1,000 heat per second out of, I think, a max of 10,000 heat for all weapons. However, if you have 2 weapons, now instead of each weapon dissipating, we'll say 500 heat, well, 1,000 heat a second, it's instead 500 heat. You have that multiplier of 1, and it is now divided betwixt those 2 weapons. So that is definitely a problem that does show up. So keep that in mind. That's why having 6 guns doesn't necessarily help you all that much.
You're wrecking my shields.
All right, last up, we have the She. This is from VIG, the Vigor Corporation, or whatever they're called. And as you can tell, these guys are the space pirates. They just sort of have their ships like welded together from whatever they've got around that's cheap and easy to get. And these guys, they use Argon technology. So we have the Argon combat drives, combat thrusters, Argon shields, and we have the bullet repeaters on them again. So yeah, this ship works pretty well as well. They don't have anything special that they do. They don't have any kind of like, as far as I can tell, they don't have any like really special things, but their ships are very tanky. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. Not the most maneuverable even with the best kit, but still, it's intended to go after medium ships, not small ships. So it'll still go out there and do the trick quite nicely. But alright guys, on to the footage.
You're wrecking my shields.
Alright, so the question becomes, when and where would you actually use these things? So, when you are trying to design, say, a carrier fleet, you will want these specific ships to probably be 1 in 3, 1 in 4. So for every 4 of the normal fighters you have, the interceptors, if you will, the medium fighters, you will instead have 1 heavy fighter that is designed to go out there, punch above its weight category, and just do a ton of damage very quickly. So if you don't want to use the miniguns, by the way, you can get away with using, say, tau accelerators or splits. You could give everyone muon charges if you really wanted to. You could go with the shard batteries for Commonwealth or the tau accelerators for split. Terrans don't have a space shotgun, as far as I can tell, so you'd probably just stick with photon barrage on them. But otherwise, that should work just fine. Everything should be great. But alright guys, hope you found this video useful, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye, everyone.